Now, when you approach a homeowner about a root collar excavation or a particular tree that they might have a problem with, the way we've been able to structure so many of our jobs has been a very simple technique where we say, well, the root collar excavation on this one tree, which is virtually guaranteed to improve its health and its ability to withstand extreme conditions that you get from the weather, very hot, very dry, very wet, whatever the case might be. And if you only do one, that the cost will be $150, $250. I'm not going to tell you what to charge because every market has a different sort of a fee structure that they introduce. You decide what it takes to put your men and equipment on that job, and that's what you charge. But what we tell them is just say the same forces at work with this tree, we believe are at work with all of the other trees that we see around on your yard or in this particular area. We have done put together what we refer to as a tree resource evaluation. This has support in ANSI Standards Part 5, the site planning and development and construction that I've referred to before. And you need to look at that. I'm going to read to you just several categories so that you know exactly what I'm talking about. A tree management report should include, but not limited to, tree locations shown on the land survey, description of the applicable tree population, species, condition, and distribution, suitability for conservation, good, moderate, or poor, limits of construction, evaluation of effects to trees, notes on the proximity of trees to existing and proposed structures, recommendations for retention, design changes, conservation recommendations, and so forth. And so this report can be combined with your root collar excavations to make a very, very nice package that you can offer. And we tell the people, well, if you want to have all of them done, there are certain economies of scale. Once you get us, our manpower and equipment here, you've paid for the most expensive part of it. While we're here, we can do another 20 or 30 root collars and tag, number, measure, and make a report for a combined amount of money. Frequently, if there are 25 or 30 trees in the last 10 years of our doing tree resource evaluations, the average number of trees on a property, believe it or not, is somewhere around 60. Now we classify them in less than 3 inches, 3 to 6 inches, and then above 6 inches, and we tag them accordingly. And we've got a lot of information on how you further develop this report in another section of this, but right now we're just telling you that the root collar excavation can be combined with some very simple measurement, tagging, numbering, counting, and evaluation type things where you tell the customer you've got 45 trees that have their collars exposed, and then what you'll find after these collars are exposed become a subject of this report, and we're going to cover that right now in a minute. We're to the point now where you are talking to the customer, and if you're lucky enough to have a video demonstration of what a root collar excavation looks like, and if you buy into our program, we provide you with a link to a website that will give your customer a demonstration of everything that you're going to do in advance. If you don't want to use our website, we suggest that you buy a part of our program that shows you how to post this and make your own. But what we're trying to do is illustrate to the customer that once these areas are exposed and we've initiated the first treatment to expose it to air and light, you're going to find a number of other things that require an exchange of what we call the big four: water, air, nutrients, and energy. Water, irrigation, air, aeration and decompaction. If you're a turf guy, you know about that. If you have an air tool, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is how you introduce porosity into the soil so it'll absorb water. And then nutrients, which are your fertilizers or biostimulants, and energy, which is the sun's energy, or in our case, the energy that you're asking the customer to put up in the form of money and labor from your company to clear these collars and to get them back to even, so that these trees can begin to support themselves in a way we call cheap to keep. Cheap to keep means that they can take care of themselves using their own resources within a designed ecosystem of balance. And that's exactly where we're headed. And so you're going to, at any given time, illustrate to the customer how they're going to swap water, air, nutrients, and energy. Right now, the root collar excavation is the one example we've given you of how this opens up a gateway into additional tree preservation actions that can begin to be scheduled according to the customer's design intent and their financial resources. How much money's in the budget? We know that in this new normal, we have a heightened expectation of services for less money, and so we're going to have to figure out a way to do more for less, and the air tool and the root collar excavation is a very, very good way to start the ball rolling and find additional tree preservation actions needed to correct these deficiencies. Now, we've talked about the root collar excavation being a gateway to open up to other deficiencies. The kind of deficiencies that we're talking about are that you're going to see as evidence when you start around this tree and you begin to open up the collar. You're going to find out how heavily the mulch is layered in there. If it's more than 2 to 4 inches, ANSI specifies 2 to 4 inches. If it's more than that, then you don't need to add more mulch. You need to aerate, decompact, and incorporate. And so you're going to have an indication, once you do the collar, of how heavily that mulch, if you have any at all. If there's none to be seen or observed or evaluated on that site, you're going to need to put some there. And that is another gateway that you follow into. And before you put that mulch down, depending on what the condition of the root system is, you want to aerate and decompact. That's our next tree preservation action that we're going to be talking about. And then on top of that, we have topsoil. And you're going to have, with your core sample, have a very, very good idea of how thick the topsoil is if they happen to be lucky enough to have any of it in the critical root zones of the plants that need it for growth. Topsoil is the black dirt that is involved with the roots, the microorganisms, and the organic matter. It is literally a live medium. And so topsoil is another feature that is a tree preservation action. You can either haul it in, you can buy it, or you can make it on site, and we'll show you exactly how it leads in that direction as we go through these tree preservation actions. And then we have biostimulants, which are a mixture of organic humates, kelp, and sea extracts that we mix with various other amendments that we in turn inoculate with. That's another tree preservation action. And then depending on what the tree looks like up above, does it have storm damage? Does it need to be shaped? Does it have enough space above ground and below ground for its root growth? Is there any root pruning necessary? Once you've opened these collars up, you're going to see all kinds of obstructions and things that the customer is going to be dissatisfied with, and you're going to need to make recommendations as to how to get rid of them. Don't make the mistake of saying you're going to do all of this in one fell swoop, because you don't know what you're going to find. And as we've gone through this sequence, you've seen how very different each tree can look depending on how it has been grown and what sort of factors stimulate root growth. Roots grow continuously along the path of least resistance. And if you've got a small tree that's just been planted 2 or 3 years ago and has had lots of mulch piled up, you're going to find most of its roots right in that mulched, piled up volcano area. And we have in our time, place, and space tree preservation action, we've got all kinds of advice that come right out of ANSI on how you are to properly prune those roots and condition the tree for long-term survival so that it can be cheap to keep. Cheap to keep.